started writing the following words over 20 years ago. They are about what happened to me over 30 years ago. The incident that I've recently learned is now known by the term D-Day, happened around March of 1992. I have edited most of what follows to remove the names of people and places in anticipation of perhaps sharing it. I did attempt to correct some spelling and punctuation that had never concerned me before. I intend to offer a conclusion and maybe some advice at the end. It should be quite noticeable that although I did not alter my words to use the common terms and acronyms that I have encountered in this form in the time that I have lurked here, many things have not changed much in 30-plus years since my encounter with my WW on D-Day, which I referred to back then as the encounter at the truck stop. I wrote most of these words not to share with others, but just for myself. I had no one to share with or talk to about this other than my WW, who trickled so little truth for over a quarter of a century that it wouldn't moisten the bottom of a paper cup. There was nothing like Reddit, or at least nothing I was aware of, that I could have used for advice or lament back then. I suspect had there been, my life would have proceeded quite differently. Perhaps not. The advice and support shared in this forum would have been a godsend to me. If you decide to read my thoughts from the Jurassic period, please consider my actions were taken by someone who was completely alone, without the knowledge of the unfortunate experts of Reddit, and strongly driven by the boy, me, who grew up in a broken home, who once told himself that, "I will not ever do that. I will never leave." The following thoughts are from early March of 2002, which was 10 years after the truck stop encounter of 1992. 10 years ago this week, I was parked at a Gulf service station/truck stop at the southern end of the large area that I was responsible for as a field service technician for my employer. I worked on a variety of point-of-sale equipment, computers, banking equipment, etc. I was near a little town on the interstate highway that I will just call Truck Stop Town, and a crossing highway. The highway was the road toward the small city of my employer's local office, and also in the general direction of my home. Another 20 miles beyond that was the tiny town school where my wife was employed. I recall it was the end of February or early March 1992. This gas station was a place where I frequently stopped because it had a clean restroom and a working payphone. It was, and still is, the typical interstate highway truck stop. This was a couple of years before my employer started providing us with mobile phones. I needed the payphone to communicate with my employer's dispatch center. My wife was certainly unaware of this location being a place I frequented. I was parked and seated in my vehicle looking down at the handheld device we field technicians all use to document our service calls. The device was updated a few times a day by coupling it to the handset of almost any standard telephone, including most payphones of the time. It was the bleeding edge of technology in 1992. I glanced up for a second and was surprised to see my wife's car stopped at a red light preparing to turn right. She'd apparently just exited the interstate highway. I was amused to see her so many miles away from where she should be. She would normally be at home or running late at the tiny town school where she had worked for over 10 years as a public high school teacher. Both our home and her school were nearly an hour's drive south of this spot in slightly different directions. She would not likely notice me till she made that right turn. I looked down to finish what I was keying in so I could catch up to her quickly in case she didn't see me. I assumed if she saw me that she would pull into the gas station. When I finished and looked up, she was just disappearing from my view and traveling at about 85 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone. She never drove that fast. I started my car and moved down a fairly long driveway to get to the highway where she had just flown by at high speed. She was already out of sight in a place where about a mile of the highway was visible. She would have had to maintain that high speed to disappear so quickly. This was a joke, was my first thought. My second thought was that she desperately did not want to be seen. I wondered if she saw me looking down at my work and believed that I did not see her. I drove in the direction she had just gone at slightly above the speed limit myself for about 20 minutes. Gambling, it was a joke, but I never caught her. I wanted to drive straight home, of course, because I wanted to speak to her. However, I had a 5-minute stop related to my work that I had to make at my employer's office to order a part that I needed for an important customer's machine before I could head home. If I didn't make that stop first, I would be in serious trouble with my customer the next day. I made the stop. However, after making that stop and ordering the service part that I needed, I sat at the office in the dark for about an hour thinking about what I had seen. I had a certain amount of dread. My gut feeling was something bad was about to go down. Eventually, I had no choice but to go home and find out why my wife had fled the scene so quickly. When I got home, she greeted me happily near the front door, pretending nothing odd had transpired. She presented the usual loving and happy demeanor of my wonderful wife. My assumption at this point was that she thought or hoped I had not seen her drive by earlier. There's a lot from that evening that I can't recall with great clarity, yet oddly I can remember my exact words to her. I was a bit accusatory right away and said, "Who lives in truck stop town that you would rather spend time with than me?" Her smile disappeared and she straightened up her posture, raising her head with her nose in the air. Her smile was gone, and now she had near zero emotion on her face. She said, "Yes, there is someone." My gut was right. During our conversation, she said, he was not actually from that town and she would not say his name. She claimed that I did not know him. I assumed that in the 2 or 3 hours that had passed since her drive-by, she had time to think about things and consider whether or not I had seen her. She must have decided to come clean with at least that tiny bit of information. Little more information was gathered from her that night, other than a rather emotionless comment of, "I have some decisions to make." She said those words as if the implications were marriage ending. I went so dark that it frightened me, then and now, because of what I was holding back. After so many years together, she was showing me a face that I had never seen. The thoughts I had towards her, and whoever he was, were so bad that I went to another room to get control. It was a couple of hours before I calmed down. We slept together in our bed that night, but there may as well have been miles between us. The following days, I wanted to know more. I asked if he was someone from the tiny town where she taught school that I will just call School Town. She said he definitely wasn't from School Town because that would be crazy since everyone knows everybody and everything in a small town. She said he was someone she met a while ago at the local mall in the nearby small city that I will call Small City where we lived. She said they had a nice conversation as she was doing some shopping for the school's senior prom. She was responsible for planning the prom every year. She said they hung out together for a while. She described him as older with children, well off financially because he had something to do with manufacturing. He was in town for just a short while on business and was from a large city I will just call large city 2 hours away down the interstate highway. After this meeting, they went their separate ways. She thought no more about him after that. However, she said, the next day he made a bold move by phoning the school office and requesting to speak with her. She said that she was embarrassed by him calling the school office the way he did, but that led to their meeting that evening after school. She was so excited to have this man interested in her. She said he had a cabin on the lake near Truck Stop Town. She said that cabin is where they would meet from time to time when he was in town. I assumed they were physical right away. She never would talk much about that. There never was any doubt or denial that she and he were in a sexual affair. That is why adults meet at a cabin on the lake. They have sex. I assumed that after sex they talked about the people in their lives that are so much less important than they believed themselves to be. I wondered then, and I wondered now, what did she say about me? Did she think about me at all when he was on top of her? The things that must have transpired between them played over and over in my head. In the next few weeks after the encounter at the truck stop, there was little interaction between us. She had her nose up in the air and spoke little as she went about her late evenings after work. I say late because she started getting home very late. I assumed she was with him at the cabin she'd described, so I went out of my way to not come home till late myself. That was easy for me to accomplish with my work. 12-hour days were not out of the ordinary, and I was on 24-hour call the rest of the time. After a few days, I also decided to just match her attitude and walk around with my nose in the air and silently ponder what the future held. I honestly didn't think there was much to ponder beyond splitting our assets. We had a small home about half paid for and no children. There was my 401k plan that I'd been building for about 10 years. It seemed to me she was checked out of our marriage and making plans to move to large city to be with her new awesome boyfriend. I was assuming she would wait for her contract to end with the current school year and then be on her way to the wonderful new life with him. It was always important to her to fulfill her obligations to the school. She would finish her contract. Apparently, it was not so important to honor vows made to God. Of course, these were all assumptions on my part. I got very little more information out of her after the first few days. Mostly on my mind were those words from the first evening, "I have decisions to make." That was about all she would share after the first day or so. What did it matter, though? It seemed to me we were finished. We just coexisted in the same house for a few weeks. In our previous decade together, many bad things had happened to us, mostly her. She had health problems from the beginning of our relationship. She was diagnosed with endometriosis, a condition which quickly became the scourge of our lives. It was not a simple case either. It was severe and had no cure. I don't think a woman, even with a more minor case, would understand her challenges with this condition. She had the first of many abdominal surgeries shortly after our honeymoon in the summer of 1981. That was when the condition was first diagnosed. She previously had a cyst removed from an ovary as a teenager, and her reproductive system was going to be even more greatly challenged by this additional problem. It was so bad it started causing bowel obstructions and hospital visits. The best treatment for the condition at the time was understood to be pregnancy. Multiple pregnancies were even better because the out-of-control endometrial tissue did not grow with the level of hormones present while carrying a baby. It seemed much like cancer to me, but the doctor said no. In the 1980s, the science of getting pregnant was not so great and helpful as today. What was called test tube babies were in the news as the near future. I remember one period when an expensive drug called Danocrin was prescribed. We were hopeful it would be effective. It was enormously expensive and not covered by my insurance. It was taken over a period of weeks while no unprotected sex was allowed because of possible birth defects due to the drug. Then at some point, the drug was paused and it was time to try to make a baby. It was the late 1980s, and we tried, and then again when she was probably fertile, and again and again. We were never able to have a child, and then things got worse, much worse. It was so bad that in 1991, she had to have a total hysterectomy. It was devastating to us both, but certainly more so to her. There would be no natural children, nor would there soon be relief from the disease. She would continue to suffer all the other problems associated with endometriosis, probably for her lifetime. That surgery for the hysterectomy was about a year prior to the encounter at the truck stop, the surgery that ended our prospect of ever having children. Now, just a year later, she has this new man in her life and a decision to make. I had a cold wife who, on the rare occasion that I saw her, had little to say. All of our years together trying to build a life seemed unimportant to her. Days went by, and I was honestly in no hurry for a resolution by this time. I just gave her the same silent, non-caring treatment when we crossed paths. I still assumed the marriage was over and silently wondered how the rest of my life would be without her in it. My working all the time helped. When at work, there was little room for other thoughts to creep in. Thoughts of her and what she was doing and going to do only bothered me at night as I lay in bed in the dark looking up at the ceiling. I pictured her with this shadowy, anonymous, rich man. She refused to speak of it anymore. She made her decision. I wondered why I wasn't spending more time making decisions for myself. Did I not care? I don't recall my exact thoughts of 10 years ago, but it seems like I just no longer cared. I was also so imperfect. I'm not tall, not handsome, not thin, not a great talker, a total wallflower, not God's gift to women in any form, etc. My wife and I did not start dating till I was about 26 years old. She would have been about 23. I had been acquainted with many women by that time, but never seemed to inspire much interest from them beyond a few weeks. There were a couple of girls that I might have enjoyed spending some more time with, but I just didn't click for them. I always moved on and wondered if it would always be that way. There was even a 5-year period where I worked on an oil exploration crew that moved from town to town across the southern United States. In those towns were many young women who were interested in the group of young men briefly working in their town as a possible means of escape. We were fairly loaded with money because they paid us well. Their interest was never piqued with any permanence for me. There was one memorable occasion when 2 young ladies pulled through the gas station where our crew was meeting to start the day. One rolled down her window and asked me if I needed any help in bed. I assured them that I did need that, and they spent the next few weeks of my life helping me. They were very nice, but it was a transactional relationship. When our crew left town, they must have found some other young man to help. Looking back, I now have trouble putting names and faces on the young women I encountered. I'm equally certain they do not recall much about me. My now wife had several ex-boyfriends in her life by that time, and I had actually met her once while she dated a friend from high school. It was only a brief encounter that I never dwelled on, but I did remember her. There was no love at first sight moment, although she said that she remembered that she liked me way back then. I guess the year of that brief encounter would have been around 1976 or 77. They broke up at some point. I remember her describing a couple of relationships while she was in college preparing to become a teacher. We didn't talk a lot about kinky stuff, but she did mention some details and experiences at college. One encounter she described involved a basket chair hanging from the ceiling. In other words, neither of us was inexperienced at the time of our relationship. We had both been in this world for quite a while. Fast forward a few years to approximately 1980, and I was enrolled in an electronics trade school in large city. One day when I had returned home for a 3-day weekend holiday, she saw me from across the parking lot of the local Buddy's grocery store. I was surprised she recalled my last name, which she called out because I think she said she did not even remember my first name. She was not dating anyone, nor was I. I invited her and we went out that evening and again the very next day. She was just starting her teaching career in another town, and like me, she was just home for the weekend. It seemed like kismet. I thought to myself, maybe she was the one. We saw each other long distance for months. I soon after encountered my friend whom she had dated in prior years to let him know. He decided that I had broken some sort of bro code and concluded we were no longer friends. I decided that I could live with that since our lives were so far apart by then anyway. Then, after graduating from trade school, when I got a job with a large international company as a field service technician, I took an open position in the local office to be near her. We were exclusively seeing each other for many more months. We married in the summer of 1981 in a tiny church with our families and some friends in attendance on a hot June day. We took vows that we had written together, and I meant what I said. I came from a broken home and barely knew my father. I was not going to be like that man. She was my partner for life, and I had been looking for her all of my life up till then. Our vows said as much. But now all these years later, March 1992, she has a boyfriend on the side, a husband she does not seem to value, and a decision to make. I believe I mentioned that I also thought I should have decisions to make. I wondered if she thought that hers was the only plan that mattered. Sometime after the encounter at the truck stop and after we became silent, stoic creatures that only crossed each other's paths from time to time, she apparently made that decision. After all of our years together with all of the pain and trauma she had suffered, and all of our failed attempts to have children, it looked like I was not important any longer. I was not oblivious to the appreciation of some rich fellow giving her attention. I expected one or both of us was going to finally say that we are finished. One of us was going to pull the Band-Aid. Her contract with tiny school-town school district would be up soon enough. Shortly after we went to bed late one evening, I was on my back staring up at the ceiling, just wondering when I would fall asleep. I don't even recall how many weeks or months had gone by when she moved towards me in the bed we shared and put her hand on my face. I hadn't noticed a small tear in my eye until she touched it and rubbed it with her fingers. She held me close and started to spoon me, and I knew she had made whatever decision it was that she had to make. So as I lay there, I knew it was time for me to decide. A very long story shortened, I eventually decided to stay too. I'm certain that I cannot adequately describe how the broken home of my youth swayed my decision to remain in this marriage. I had a vow to keep and that promise to myself so many years ago that I would never leave. We spoke very little about it after that. I tried, but she declined. I do recall reminding her of a conversation we had concerning the importance of fidelity in our marriage. She only replied that she recalled the conversation, but I'm not sure she did. I reminded her how important that was. I also reminded her of a similar conversation we had by phone shortly after marriage when I was training in another state for 5 weeks. I told her by phone one night about a very pretty young lady who had propositioned me at the motel I had stopped at during the drive to that training center. I described how I had proudly shown her my new wedding ring, and the pretty young lady moved along to the next guy. I then thought of the 2 girls who had helped me all those years ago, and how irresistible they were. How easy it was to resist this girl by showing her my ring. My wife complimented my fidelity on that phone call and told me that was all she required as long as I never hit her. I assured her that would never be a problem, and I would never strike her. Even during those dark hours after the encounter at the truck stop, I kept that promise and did not strike her. I asked her if anyone had ever abused her that way, and she said no. She said it never got to that point, but close in her youth. Her father was loud, rigid, unforgiving, impatient. It gave her daddy issues, she said. My wife returned to being that happy girl I had known for so many years, and I mimicked her actions in every way. Life went on. I soon realized it would never be quite the same. We knew there would be no children and that she would likely always suffer from her medical condition. She did not wish to adopt. I was finding myself suddenly happy that I would not bring any children into this world who looked anything like me. Life went on for the two of us. 5 years later, around 1997, I asked her to take a ride with me. I pointed out a sign describing a new addition of larger homes about to start construction. I said to her, "If we are in this for life, let's build a new house." She had to know what I meant. I meant, if you are with me, then let us move on. The place we were living was tiny, and we just finished paying off the mortgage. It also always seemed to me this home had been soiled. It seemed to be true to me even though she said her boyfriend had never been to our home. I assumed it was a lie. I traveled too much for my work for them to not have taken advantage of my absence. We soon purchased a 1-acre lot on a street that so far only existed on paper. After the street was finally completed and our house built, we were the first to move into this new subdivision. It was 1998, and we moved into a home that I had sketched on a piece of paper and then had it professionally drawn. We were putting the past behind us. I quit the job that I had utterly hated for almost 20 years with my wife's excited blessing and found a new one that was so great. Life has some good moments after all. I was happy and looking forward. March 2010, 18 years after the truck stop encounter. My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer late last year and had a double mastectomy. When her oncologist asked her about doing reconstructive surgery on her breasts, she said no. She said she was no longer vain and had no use for them. I kind of liked her boobs but kept my mouth shut. It's her body, and if she doesn't want some big fake breasts, that is her business. It's cancer after all. Currently, she is going through chemotherapy. Her breasts are now gone along with all her reproductive organs from her previous hysterectomy. Our lives go on. March 2017, 25 years after the truck stop encounter. First, I should mention that my wife has been cancer-free since the surgery and chemotherapy in 2010 and 2011. I just forgot about this journal for a few years. Maybe I thought I was healed. Being involved in a rather technical career, even though I am not and was not particularly good at it, I've had an online presence for a substantial part of it. Even though I guarded my personal information in what I considered to be a good fashion, I failed as most people do. At some point, it was noticed by some newsfeed clickbait or overly nosy search engine that I had a curiosity about the subject of infidelity in marriage. This was not a purposeful thing on my part, but must have been an inclination. At some point, I noticed that I was being offered on social media on a fairly regular basis stories about cheaters. Over the years, all manner of information came my way, including one day an article about the top 10 professions that people cheat on their spouses. Of course, I read it and discovered my wife, the now retired teacher, was in one of the top 10 professions in that article. I thought to myself, that was probably correct. Then something else dawned on me for the first time in 25 years. The people teachers cheated with were typically other teachers and administrators. Of course they were. That thought had occurred to me for an instant all those years ago. But my wife then told me about the wealthy man from large city. I asked my wife about it, and in an apparent moment of honesty, she said, yes, it was Mr. Mouse, not his real name. He was a co-worker of many years, many decades actually. The affair went on for years. It started years before I found out. The next question she must have expected at this point. Were you having sex with him while we were trying so hard to get pregnant? Her answer was quickly, yes. It is like she had expected the question for a while, like she had at some point decided to come clean. The next question she may not have anticipated. On that first day that we started having sex again after the weeks on the Danacrin treatment, did you have sex with him before you came home to me? She looked down and said yes. She'd been trying to double her chance of having a baby. She was with me probably an hour or two after him. Paternity was not important to her. Maybe she would have even preferred him to be the father. She says, that is not true. My dignity certainly was of no significance. Lastly, the affair continued sporadically for years after our reconciliation. It was over now because he was bedridden and suffering from Alzheimer's. Virtually everything she has ever told me up to this point has been a lie. There was no cabin on a lake. They actually shacked up at a borrowed RV at a roadside park near the truck stop. He was not some rich guy who lived hours away in large city. He was really just a middle-class co-worker who lived 18 minutes from our home and who she saw and spoke with every single day at school. Every single day, every freaking day, every day of her entire career was spent near the teacher's lounge with her boyfriend. Every day she had the opportunity to be honest, but still lied to me. Every day she betrayed me. Every day she disrespected me. My only consolation is that Mr. Mouse currently resides bedridden in a vegetative state in a spare bedroom of his daughter's house. He has been there for years. It was the first time that I ever had a face to hang on to the man that I had hated for so long. There is a brain-dead old man lying in a bed 18 minutes away from me that I hate. He is about 20 years our senior, much feeding her perceived daddy issues. For the first time in years, I feel hate. That dark couple of hours from so many years ago seems so familiar. March 2018, 26 years after the truck stop encounter. The AP my wife carried on with died late last year. My wife asked me if she could go to the funeral. As I looked at her with my mouth half open, I wondered if she could read my face. When finally I said yes, I was thinking that I should go and sit in the back and try to decide how many people in the crowd knew he was enjoying my wife. I didn't go to the funeral. I did visit his grave weeks later and told his dead wife what he was doing while she was dying of cancer. Yes, I did the math. Her marker says she died in 1990. That happened. He did that. My wife did that. His wife lingered dying of brain cancer for years while they did that to her and to me. When we were trying to have a baby and my wife was doing me and Mr. Mouse, his wife was dying of brain cancer. It was then that I really recalled the times my wife spoke of Mr. Mouse fondly, whose wife was dying. Poor Mr. Mouse, she would say, as his sperm was probably swimming around inside her. July 2022, 30-plus years after D-Day. A few days after I happened to come across this place called Reddit. Please consider how alone I have been up to this point. Suddenly, I encountered thousands of people who knew what I was feeling. They know what I am thinking. It is astonishing. Hello, Reddit. I do not hate my WW. She has had such an unenviable life of pain and disappointment, and it would be wrong to hate her. I also do not love her. She must know. I am only honest enough about it to not say, I love you anymore. It happened when I finally found out just how much and just how long she had lied to me about who he was. I find that I somehow reached something near the indifference that is so frequently suggested here in these forums. I just practice my indifference in such a nice way. We are nice to each other. We are on the downside of over the hill and just watch out for each other. Next year I'll turn 69 years old, and she will probably make my favorite birthday apple pie. A few weeks later, she will turn 66, and I will buy her a red velvet cake I will decorate myself. Having said all that, I do recall at some point mentioning writing a conclusion or some advice. My only advice to the younger me would only be to more seriously consider divorce. I used a vow I made in my youth to soak up the rest of my life. I later had firmly decided not to want children, and my WW couldn't have them, so why leave? I thought I would never trust anyone again, so why leave? Well, I think that if I had this Reddit and other forms of plain-talking people available to me in 1992, the second half of my life could have been quite different. So many of the experts here would have guided me so well. It hasn't been a bad life, but different might have been better. I was nearly 40 years old on D-Day, but there might have been time to build another life. I had no idea anyone but I was going through this back then. I was alone. What great value would have been 1,000 posters telling me, hire a lawyer, take an STD test, talk to a counselor. I am not standing on a stump shaking my fists at the sky. I've had some good times in my life. I've had many good times with her and her family. I plan to have a few more good times in the future. However, having lurked on Reddit for over a year now, I realize that many of those things that trigger me to this day might have been left behind. Every time she mentions a coworker, student, teaching, watches a cheating TV show, etc., is a trigger that would not exist if she were no longer in my life. Also, if you are contemplating betraying someone, think about that dark period you hear people discussing in this forum. Think for a moment about the life-altering act that you don't think your spouse is capable of performing. I assure you, they are capable. I easily could have. I was so close to an act of violence that I had never seen in myself before or since. As I look at my WW with near indifference today, I need only a thought to return to the emotion of that moment on D-Day. March 2023, 31 years after D-Day. I guess I will continue. We go on dates, we travel and take vacations together. We had a wonderful 10-day cruise last year. It was to make up for the cruise we had to cancel because of her emergency hospital stay for a blocked intestine. Endometriosis continues to plague her. I am thinking about a multi-day Mississippi riverboat cruise next year. We are nice to each other. We are making out our last will and testament. She is shopping for 2 cemetery plots for us to be buried side by side. If I die first, we will be buried side by side. If she dies first, I suspect I will make different plans for me. I will be 70 years old soon. November 2023, 31 plus years after D-Day. 2 days ago, my WW and I traveled 2 hours to Large City for an appointment with the oncologist from her original battle with breast cancer. A swollen lymph node is now a concern. As we returned home, she discussed the need to return soon to determine if the swollen node is still a problem or just the result of a recent vaccination. The concern is, of course, that this is an early indicator of cancer's return. That is to be seen. On our return trip from Large City, I needed to make a restroom stop as we exited the interstate highway. We are, of course, at the scene of D-Day from so many decades in the past. In the years after D-Day, I continued to use this location in a similar capacity as before. My handheld device had been quickly replaced by a cell phone, then a laptop, and eventually a smartphone over the years. But the bathroom was still a necessity for a traveling service technician. Perhaps I was shopping for pain by using this familiar place so frequently, but it was also just a matter of convenience. Much like me, the place deteriorated over the decades. The nice clean bathroom eventually got old and unpleasant. Such is life. 2 or 3 years ago, a temporary fence was put up around it as it was torn down. I suspected a bright, shiny new place would be constructed. Sure enough, my WW and I were parked at the new Shell truck stop with an attached Whataburger. I can glance off to my left and see the intersection where my now much older eyes saw my WW stopped at that red light. She looks up and tells me that she will just wait in the car while I go in. Upon returning to the car, I pause momentarily and look around. She says nothing and scrolls through her phone as we depart the scene of D-Day, 1993. March 2024, 32 years after D-Day. She is still cancer-free but is about to get a complete knee replacement. We are still together. August 2024, 32 plus years after D-Day, she has her new knee. Life goes on. Have we reconciled? I suppose we have. Do I still get the mind movies? Yep. Do I still get triggers? For sure. Even though many have reported it takes a couple of years to get over them, mine persist after 3 decades. I'm now 70 years old. Perhaps that's just me. I hope it is different for you. Edit to add, it is now a couple of days before her 68th birthday, near the end of August 2024. I woke from sleep to make a trip to the bathroom. It is a fairly common occurrence these days. It is around 4:30 a.m. When I return to bed, I hear my WW speak in her sleep. Speaking in her sleep is something she had done in the past on rare occasion, usually words or phrases with no context. On this early morning, she said, "That turn you on Mr. Mouse?" She was dreaming about him. In what I regard as major self-control, I decided to see if she would carry on a conversation. I spoke back to her calmly, asking what she was doing for Mr. Mouse. Silence. I guess I'm not so brilliant. She spoke no more. The next day I shared her words and asked her if she dreamed of him. More silence. I expected she would say something, but no. Maybe she didn't want to lie. I truly believe that she thinks omission is not lying. Life goes on. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more crazy Reddit stories.